pandemics. The pandemics is a disease that can affect a lot of countries in the world. Actually, we are in a pandemic caused the coronavirus. This sickness is affect all the entire world. But what other pandemics are affect the world? Here are 10. A new virus of influenza was born in China in 1968. This is called the Hong Kong flu. This virus affects countries like China and the United States. The numbers of effects caused this pandemic are a little bit more. At 1 million of people around the world has died.
Pandemic number 2. This is probably the most infectious virus ever known, transmitted by direct contact or respiratory tract. This virus is very contagious, and its symptoms can manifest within 2 hours of contagion. Throughout the history, it is the disease that caused more than 200 million people. The vaccine was introduced for the first time in the year 1973. Interesting is worldwide. That is why it is important to get vaccinated since in 2003 were around 30,000 cases due to people who were not vaccinated to avoid the disease. And it's very important to vaccinate children and the other people.
The measles virus is probably the most infectious virus ever known. It's caused by the paramyxovirus that is transmitted by contact, direct or airway. This virus is super contagious and can manifest 2 hours after contagion with infected person, and through history, it was the cause of death of more than 200 million people. The vaccine was introduced by first time in 1963, and since then its utilization has progressively increased worldwide in the countries developed where this disease is practically eradicated. For almost more than 2 decades, measles has reappeared in 2019 with more than 30,000 cases. This has been attributed to people who cannot vaccinate their children despite the recommendations of health agencies, and most people that does not support the vaccination of this disease. Put your health and of everyone around him.
Next one is during 1855 and 1956, and it's called the bubonic plague, better known as the third pandemic. This could be the most devastating pandemic in all the world because it traveled over the 5 continents, infecting everyone of the already known Black Death. The numbers of deaths in this pandemic are incredible. Over 12 million of people in all the world.
The disease of AIDS has killed more than 25 million people, and this virus is an important part of our history. Mother being great and sad protagonist of pop culture, an example of famous with this disease were the great Freddie Mercury and Charlie Sheen, or Magic Johnson is a disease. It's a disease caused by a retrovirus that causes the affectations of our cells of the defense weakening. Our system in the four destructions of human defense makes the person cannot defend himself against common and uncommon diseases, having lethal consequences. A curious fact: it is not the virus itself what kills, but the disease that causes not having defenses. The virus transmits through direct contact with mucous membranes or blood, and also transmits through the pregnancy of an infected mother to her baby. Today, there are investigations active and hard work is being done against this virus existing. Treatments that greatly improve important the quality of life of their HIV patients still have no cure, but today the treatments allows that HIV positive people have a life expectancy equal to unified people. There are vaccines administered in patients who have been in direct contact with people infected that drastically reduce the probability of contagion. Ideally there is to administer in 1 or 2 hours after contact, but never after first 72 hours.
HIV/AIDS is the cause of its maximum development of the AIDS. This is caused by the death of more than 25 million people. And this virus is an important part of our modern history, being a great and sad protagonist of pop culture how Freddie Mercury and Charlie Sheen. Is a disease caused by retrovirus that causes the involvement of our cells, waking our immune system, therefore the destruction of bad diseases that cause no defenses. The virus is transmitted in direct contact with mucous membranes or blood, and is also transmitted through the pregnancy of an infected mother to her baby. Today, there is active research and hard work against this virus. There are treatments that greatly improve the quality of life of their patients. HIV still has no cure, but today treatment allows seropositive people to have an equal life infected people. There are vaccines to be supplied in patients who have been in direct contact with infected people who drastically reduce this probability of contagion. It really has to be administered 1 to 2 hours after contact, but never after the first 74 hours.
The Black Death is our next pandemic. It was the last one caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis. In this case, the main route of transmission was the bite of fleas that live in rodents, mainly rats. It's a rare disease today, but has a great historical importance for being responsible for killing approximately 1/3 of the population of Europe in the Middle Age. It's estimated that around 75 million people died, at least 25 million in Europe. Today, it is a disease that can only be found in rural areas and less developed small populations. The great loss of population brought economic change since it lowered the cultivated area in Europe, which in turn decreased agricultural production. However, this made the sudden labor shortage provide a great incentive for innovation that helped bring the end of the Middle Age.
Spanish flu. It was caused by an outbreak of virus A influenza, which killed between 50 to 100 million people worldwide. Between 1918 and 1919, many of its victims were adults, young and healthy, unlike other influenza epidemics that affect children, elderly, or debilitated people. It was the worst of the three influenza epidemics of the 20th century, and it was especially deadly because it was at the end of the First World War and during the first post-war year. Therefore, the states were not prepared to be faced with the pandemic, health and nutritional deficiencies, in addition to the impossibility of isolating infected people in a hospital that were full of warfare further facilitate contagion. Citizens found themselves unprotected against the virus, and in a few months the disaster was uncontrollable. This pandemic exceeded the number of victims of the Black Death and multiplied the number of those who died of the war several times. 2.5% of the world population died, and the 20% of us were infected deposited the name. Its origin was not Spanish. The disease was observed for the first time in the United States, and they called it Spanish flu because the pandemic received greater attention in the Spanish press and the rest of the world, since in Spain there was no war, and therefore its media were not censored.
The next is measles. The measles virus is probably the most infectious virus that has been known. It's produced by the paramyxovirus. It's transmitted by direct contact or by respiratory route. It's an extremely contagious virus and can manifest itself within 2 hours of infection. Throughout history, it was guilty of the death of more than 200 million people. The vaccine was first introduced in 1963, and since then its use has progressively increased worldwide. In developed countries where this disease has been practically eradicated for more than 2 decades, measles had appeared in 2019 with more than 13,000 cases. This has been attributed to people who have not vaccinated their children, despite the recommendation of health agencies and the OMS.
Number 10. The Hong Kong flu was the third pandemic of the 20th century. This being a new variation of the type A influenza virus. Its origin seems to have been China, where it began to spread throughout the world, talking about 1 million people in a very short time. And that is a very time the flu is talking about. Alarm sound for fear a new pandemic, affecting mainly children and the elderly.